Hello, Marie-Louise here, and I am so excited let me say that again. I'm so excited about the next 5 days. It's going to be really, really good. I'm going to have so much information for you, and you know what? We're going to talk about some things that maybe you have encountered and some other things that possibly you haven't, and we'll just talk about the things that affect your dating life, the things that you're going through in everyday life which can affect your dating life, and you maybe don't even realize that you are. You maybe don't even realize that those things are affecting your dating life. Hey Karishma, how are you? Alright, so I want to talk tonight about finances. Now, I know that's not the best topic for a lot of people, and it's a difficult one. So I think it's really important that we get it out of the way. Now, you guys, just so you know, thanks for joining in. I can see a few people have joined in. I won't be doing a lot of commenting and answering questions during this chat, but I will have a chance at the end to answer any questions that you might have and discuss anything. So feel free to leave some comments. Don't think I'm ignoring them. I will just go back to them a little bit later on. Because I do want to try and go through what I've prepared for you. Let me just check that this is all going up onto the event properly before we go too much further. Has everyone had a good day? Monday, huh? I know. Kind of sucks to be us, but that's okay. It's a little bit like the finance part of this course, isn't it? We'll just get Monday out of the way and then it's all smooth sailing. All right, I can see myself there. Excellent. So, right, big deep breath. This is exciting for me, I have to say. All right, so the thing about finances is that you may not realize how they are affecting your dating life. And so that's what I want to talk to you about. There are so many areas of life that affect our dating life and we don't even realize it. So that's why over the next few days, I'll be talking about a number of areas that I concentrate on lifestyling. God, I'm all tongue-tied tonight. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Glass of water always helps. So, for some of you who know about lifestyle, you'll know that I take the focus off dating and onto your real life, because there's more to life than dating, much as we all want to find somebody amazing. But there is a life outside of dating, and there is a life outside of relationships. And having a great life for yourself that you're happy with is often the thing that attracts somebody to you anyway. But regardless of how long that takes, and sometimes it takes a while, if we focus on the other things and get those sorted out and have you living an amazing life, then guess what? You're living an amazing life. And so then when somebody comes into that life, then you're just as happy, but maybe a little bit more. And, you know, you get to have that different type of experience. So in this session, we're going to be talking about a few different things about money and the way it affects you. So we'll be talking about having money, not having money, how you're planning your life, and certainly regarding money, how you talk about your money situation, the impression your money situation, your finances can have on other people, and of course that impacts how they think about you and perhaps whether they want to date you at all. So we'll talk about the two extremes. We won't go too much into the middle. We will talk about having a lot of money. I know that's a bit funny, isn't it? But having a substantial amount of money and not having enough money. So we'll talk about the two extremes. We can get into the middle part another time. But I think for the examples that I want to give you, the two extremes really help that. So, all right. So let's talk about having a lot of money. Now, I want to go back and just remind you that lifestyle is about getting, when I talk about dating, I talk about dating for a relationship. I'm not just talking about dating for company or maybe for sex. I'm talking about a real, live, actual relationship. Something that you want to invest your time in and you want to get a lot out of. You want to have somebody around, ideally, for life. So I'm not talking about short-term things. I am talking about the big stuff that you want to really get involved in. And with regard to dating, that can be, it can really change the way you think about things and the way you look at things. So I really want to be clear that we're talking about relationships here. So if you have a lot of money, and good on you, congratulations, you probably already know that can impact the way other people see you. So there will be times when people will be using you for that money. You may not be aware of it to begin with, and depending on how you came into that money, if it's something you've earned or something you inherited, it may not come. That realization may not come fast. You may not realize that people are using you, but when you do realize that, that's got to have an impact. So I know that if I was being used for anything, I wouldn't like it. And having a lot of money can be certainly a big a drawing factor for people to come into your life. It can be very alluring. But what happens when it goes away? And sometimes it does. So then are they going to hang around or are they not? And I think that sort of pressure can be immense for somebody who has money, because especially if they came into it sort of fairly recently, because what if it goes away? What if they spend it all? And you know what? These people will help you spend it. So it could go away a lot sooner than you maybe had anticipated. So I think that's really important to think about if you do have a lot of money. Another thing is that having a lot of money can make other people uncomfortable. So it could be that they actually don't want to spend time with you because it reminds them of how they don't have the money that you have. And that can be a really sad realization for them. And then, makes them sort of think about themselves and how they feel when they're around you or when they've been hanging out with you. And that's not your fault. Of course, that's not your fault. But having it can be difficult for other people. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So some of these people may just not want to hang out with you at all, which of course makes it difficult for you to live your life and live happily and go out and do all the things that you want to do with that money. You might be tempted to offer to pay for things for people or buy things. And in some ways, depending on the relationship, that's not such a bad thing, because if you want to do something and that's your friend and you actually really, really want them along for the experience, then that's a good thing to do. That's a nice, good, honourable thing to do. But it may be difficult for them and they might not like that. So I guess that comes down to communication and the conversations that you can have with each other about your feelings about money and their feelings about money. Because some people have hang-ups and it can be really, really difficult to be around somebody who has a lot of money, especially when they don't. So say you've got a lot of money at the moment and that person is at the other extreme and they don't. They may not be the type who wants to use you. And fair enough. I mean, it's difficult to be around somebody who has money, and I think the temptation is very real for some people. Some people will put aside their morals and just go for it. And look, I don't judge on that, but there are certainly a lot of people who don't want to be that person and they just want to be your friend, but they don't necessarily want to be your friend based on the money, and they don't want to be your friend as a result of the money, and only because you can afford to pay for them to do things. So it may be that you have to sort of consider the things that they want to do and do those things too, because they might be operating under a very, very different budget than you are. And by sort of, if they say, I want to go out for, Chinese this weekend or have something fairly cheap, and you're like, no, let's go off and have a I always say that word wrong. But, if you want to go off and have a 10-course meal, then they're going to say, all of a sudden they can't do it because that makes them uncomfortable. They can't pay for themselves and they don't want you to pay. So these are things that, you might want to consider if you are at that end of the spectrum. And it could be you've already encountered some of that already. Now, what about, let's go down slightly. What if you are living beyond your means? So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily fairly well off, and maybe it does mean that you're at the lower end of the spectrum, but you're doing your darndest to live a great life, and you're spending money and you're buying things and you're going on holidays, and you're just living a life that's not true to you, and it's certainly not true to your bank account. I have to wonder, I've known a lot of people who've done this, and when I've been living within my means, and I've had friends who were on the same salary as me, for example, we were doing the same job, and you kind of have to wonder, how are they doing it? Now, a lot of these people are absolutely living beyond their means. They're living on credit cards. They must be losing sleep at night. And I'll tell you, when we've spoken about it later on, or when I've got to know them a bit better, or, when the opportunities arisen, they have very much said that they have lost a lot of sleep wondering how they're going to pay off these debts when the bank comes calling. And, you can only put off banks for so long, and it's terrifying for them. They're stressed. They're wondering not only about how they're going to pay it off, but they're trying so desperately to live up to the lifestyle they've set up for themselves and that other people are used to seeing them living, that they're freaking out. Like, that's immense pressure to try and live up to that. So if that's you, maybe just have a think about it and think about what's important to you. Look about what you want from the future and whether living this way is going to get you there. Because it could be that it won't. And you know what? It's very likely that it won't. I'm all for having a positive mindset, and, there are other people who are more qualified than I am to go into why you need to have a really positive mindset about money and how having that mindset can bring money to you, but I'm not qualified for that, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. And there are certainly a lot of personal development coaches out there who can help you with that kind of thing. That's not my focus, so I'm not going to try and act like it is and like I know a lot about it. But definitely, if that's you and you want to consider getting some more training on that, I would welcome it. And feel free to contact me and ask me, and I might be able to recommend somebody to you. Now, let's go on to the other end of the spectrum, and that is not having much money. So now I really want to think about how having not much money affects your life. So I guess the thing is that when you don't have a lot of money, it's the opposite of when you do. I know that sounds really simple and basic, but if you think about the way I described earlier, when you do have a lot of money and you're the one who can say, let's go here and let's go there, and you might be organising holidays, and like my friends were with me, they were very much keen. They love me, we love hanging out with each other, but they were wanting to go on holidays all the time. And I had different plans in life, so I didn't have the money available for that sort of thing when they did. So whether you're saving for something or just trying to, plan for your future, which doesn't necessarily involve saving right now, it may or may not. But if you're trying to get into really good habits around money, then going on a holiday to Fiji or Bali or Las Vegas, like my friends wanted to go to, that can really be a difficult thing to deal with. So having to tell people that you don't have that kind of money is an absolute drag. I know it. Some of you out there know it. And just take a minute, go back and think about what happened. A situation where you were asked to do something that you just couldn't afford. And you know what? Feel free to leave a comment on that. And if anybody has any comments at any time on what I'm saying, by all means do leave the comments there, and because I know some people have joined in since I started, and I'll definitely come back to them at the end. But it'd be also really good to see your reactions to the things I'm saying, and I'll be able to see those later on. And also I will be having a little question and answer time at the end if anyone's got any questions or anything they'd like to discuss. So Another thing about you having money or not having money is, and also I guess that middle ground of living beyond your means when you don't have the money, is that nobody really knows what's going on for you in your life until you tell them. So, you know, the friends of mine who were going on holidays and everything, and I was terribly worried about them, but, you know, it wasn't necessarily my place to question their life choices. You know, they all had jobs, they were doing, you know, well enough for themselves. So, you know, I wasn't checking their bank account, but I certainly knew while we were working together what they were roughly earning and, you know, where they lived and that sort of thing. So you have a vague idea of what somebody's living expenses are in some ways. But the thing is, until you actually have a conversation, you don't precisely know. And you're not always comfortable having that conversation. I wasn't with them, not at the time, until, you know, much later. And revealing that kind of thing when you don't have the money is really daunting. And especially when it's somebody who, as I said before, is at the other end of the spectrum and has all the money in the world. You know, having to say, no, I can't afford to do that. No, it's not in my budget. No, it's not in my plan. I have money, but I have it set aside for something else. I can't just go away on a whim, just go away to Sydney or wherever, you know. That can be really difficult to do, and maybe you don't want to. Maybe you don't know that person well enough to have that conversation. It's completely fair. But it can then have an impact on your relationship. And, you know, you might find yourself not being invited to things, and that's really difficult, of course. And that, you know, in the end, they might be sparing your feelings because they don't want you to have to say, I can't afford it. You know, they might have noticed at another time when you did say that it nearly broke your heart. You know, if they're your friend, they know your cues, they know what you're like, and, you know, maybe they just don't want to put you through it. So, you know, that can happen. People can just sort of start cutting back on inviting you places. And I know some of the friends that I used to have, actually, you know, I want to be clear, I have all of these friends even now. You know, we have weathered all of this. There's no issue there. And the longer we got to know each other, and the deeper we got to know each other, these conversations were all possible. But we're going to get to the dating part later, but I'm laying all this groundwork because this is what happens with people you already know. So let's think about what will happen with people you don't know. All right, so we'll get back to that later. So the friends that I had, they'd say, oh, let's go to, let's go to Yumcha, and I'd be like, oh, holy cow, I know these girls, I know what their expenditure is like on a night out like that. And I'd have to say to them, so are you thinking about going out afterwards? And they'd say, yeah, of course. And I'd be like, I'll meet you out. Because you do things, you change, you have to work the situation to suit you. And I'm not talking about manipulation. What I'm saying is that if you cannot afford the dinner, but you can afford some drinks, or you would rather spend your money on the drinks, then do the drinks. I know one time I did go to Yumcha with these girls, and that's how I learnt not to do it again. And they were buying bottles of wine and having, you know, they had the full banquet and all that. So, you know, the whole rigmarole. And I don't drink wine. So there's me ordering my rice and like just ordering my one plate, because that's what I could eat. I didn't want to sample everything like they do. And I certainly couldn't get involved in that kind of cost, because at the end of the night, it gets split 6 ways, and I've spent a lot more money than I had budgeted for, and I've spent it on food and drink that I didn't actually consume. So you have to be smart about these things. And so after that night, I just met them out. And, you know, we'd always have a great night, and I'd have pre-drinks. So that's always good. But I want to sort of stop and think about the things that you're missing out on by not having money. Because I know a lot of people are working on getting more money, making great choices, maybe selling things, having a second job, that sort of thing, maybe living in a cheaper area so that they can afford to do things. Because the people who are at the wealthy end of town, they're going on holidays and they're doing things, and you're seeing that. Unfortunately, you have to see that, because if you're like me, you're on Facebook, you know a lot of people, and you can't help but see it. So those are the sort of things that you could be missing out on. So if you are a bit strapped for cash, maybe have a think about it. I've got a financial planner on board, and I can certainly put you on to him if you're looking for some ways of maybe adjusting your costs. I'm not talking about cutting costs, because that's a whole different story, but there are things that you can do that can improve your life a little bit. So if you are saving your pennies, as I said before about, if you're saving for a house, for example, we're so independent these days. We don't need a guy to buy a house for us. Wouldn't it be nice? But it's just not necessarily the case. And, as we age, we get a lot more sure about what we're looking for from life. And so you might be saving for a house or a flat or, some sort of house that you can live in, a home. And that means that you do need to save your pennies. So that can also impact your life, your hobbies, the lifestyle you have, the friends you have, and that sort of thing. And if you are doing that, you're probably quite used to staying home and, eating cheaply, not going out. You just stay home and you live a cheap life. And that's really important. But all of that can change when you start dating. So, I think we've already talked about how you feel about yourself, the self-judgment. So I won't really go into that. But I do want to sort of briefly touch on what happens with friends. We talked about them not inviting you out because they know that it's uncomfortable for you. But what about when you stop replying to their texts and you stop messaging them? Because what if they invite you out? What if you have to say, hey, I can't do it? Especially if you've texted them and said, hey, what's going on? How have you been? It's been a while. And then they say, oh, yeah, God, yeah, how are you? And I've missed you. And yeah, it has been too long. Why don't we go out soon? And you're like, I wanted to have a chat. I want to meet up with you. I want to see you. You're my friend, but I can't afford it. That's a really difficult one. So these are things that you're probably at one time or another have experienced, and that's with your friends. So imagine that kind of thing with somebody that you're trying to date. So dating, oh God, money affects that in so many different ways. And I think about a lot of these things, and I have been there, as I've said. I've been in a situation of not having a lot of money, and I'm starting a business and I'm doing it on my own. So I'm not flush right now, and I don't mind admitting it, because as far as I'm concerned, if I could admit it, maybe you can. Not asking you to, it's up to you, and not necessarily in the group or in this event. But I would like everyone to feel a little bit more comfortable with their money situation and being able to be real about it. But I'll leave that up to you, and in your own situation, your own time. But dating, no matter how you look at it, is not cheap. And if people think that it is, then I'm not sure how much dating they've done. Now, at the start, I reminded you that lifestyle is about people who are looking for relationships. I take the pressure off dating and put it onto your real life. But in the end, it is still about dating, because we're trying to get you a great life that you can live all the time, but ideally invite somebody into it. So if you're thinking about dating, you have to think about money. And if you are, let's just talk about the cheap end of town. Okay, let's talk about not having enough money, because I think most of us are probably closer to that end than having too much money. So you've probably encountered a few situations when you've been thinking about dating somebody, or, maybe doing online dating, and you've gone, I just can't really do it this week. And you don't say that to them, but that's what you're thinking. You can be doing online dating and you can be chatting to people, and sometimes by the time you get around to thinking about going out, it can be weeks or months. I know people who stretch it out for a long time, and they're quite happy to have a lot of chats and get to know each other over a long period and nice and slowly. But sometimes it'll happen a lot sooner, and that means that you need money now. Now, if you've watched any of my, if you've watched my videos, you'll know I did one a little while ago about a dating technique that I encourage, which is dating multiple people at once. And that's, for a few reasons which I mentioned in that video. But financially, that can be really difficult. So let's talk about dating somebody new and finances. Because even the cheapest of dates, which I think most people would say a coffee date is pretty cheap. Now, you all probably know this about me too, that I do not consider a coffee date to be a date, because I would like everybody to invest a bit of time into the dating process. And I think a coffee date can, at best it can be over within 10 or 15 minutes. Of course, depending on the two people, it can be dragged out, and in a good way that is, and it lengthens, shall we say, and mean that you do spend a bit more time with each other. But I do like people to actually get to know each other. And that means, for me, going on a date which involves dinner, eating, having a few drinks and dinner, any of the above. But before we've even gotten to that, you're having the conversation with somebody online and the topic comes up. Now, depending on who brings it up, you might feel a bit more comfortable. But maybe you don't want to bring it up if you don't have a lot of money. If you're thinking, God, I can see the way this person talks about money. I can see in their photos that they have what looks like expensive taste. Are they going to be interested in going out with me? We've been chatting so far, but are they actually going to be interested in me? I'm the kind of person who likes to dag around in my PJs and my trackies, and most of my photos show that. Why are they even looking at me? So it can bring up all that self-doubt again, and it might actually prolong the asking out. Because I do wonder about sometimes when the people who have conversations over months and months and months, whether they're actually wanting to meet somebody and actually get somebody into their life. And maybe money is a factor in that. Maybe they can't afford to go on actual dates, so they play it safe and they just talk online or text or, however they communicate. And you know what? In the real world, if you find somebody that you like and you don't have any money, it may actually impact whether you ask them out as well. And not just ask them out, you maybe don't even approach them, because you may be sort of not dressed as well as they are. And let's be honest, first impressions count. So if you feel like you're not dressed as well as they are, and or maybe dressed as nicely, and I'm not talking about expensive clothes, because if you know me at all, I'm not into expensive clothes. But you should have a standard. Everybody should have their own personal standard. And if you feel like your standard is lacking because of the money you have, then that will then impact whether you ask somebody, whether you approach them, whether you even want to be friends with them, and then maybe build to it. Because you might just think, no, never going to happen, because they're not going to look twice at me. And, that then means that you're doing yourself out of dating, which is a real shame, because they might have really liked you. And for whatever reason, maybe they thought that you didn't like them because of their clothes. Anything can happen. So it's just, it happens even before you're actually getting to the date part, is my point. So all of these things are going on in your head, and maybe doing your head in, because you're just going round and round. Will they like me? Do they like me for me? Am I dressed well enough? Will they go out with me? Will they be embarrassed by me? All these sort of thoughts can come into your head when you're thinking about money, especially if you've had situations like I discussed before with friends who you can't keep up with, no matter how you try. And you know what? If you're a responsible adult, you shouldn't. Like I didn't. I just said to them, you know what? I'll either work it out a different way, or we go somewhere else, or I'll just meet you later. You know, you just have to do what you have to do. But the thing with dating is you don't always want to do that. Because if it's so difficult to have that conversation with somebody that you're actually friends with, imagine how hard it will be to have it with a stranger. So, you know, you're talking online and you're trying not to give away too many details perhaps of your life. You know, if you talk about going out all the time and you're going out and doing things and that person doesn't talk about going out, then you can kind of get an idea that maybe they don't have a lot of money, or maybe they don't have a lot of friends. And the more you talk, you might be able to get a few hints and details about that from them, about this situation, but they may not want to reveal too much. Conversely, you might be that person, you might not want to reveal that to them. So let's say you've gotten through all that and one of you has asked the other one out, or it's come up and, you know, oh, I love this restaurant. Oh, I like that place too. I've always wanted to go there. Okay, so that is an opportunity to set a date. And so then you're stuck. What do I do? So now you'll be like madly thinking, when's payday? I have to pay my bills. My car insurance is due. I've got all these things to do. When are they going to want to go on a date? Can I make it next week? Can I stretch it out a little bit? You know, these things will cross your mind because, let's be honest, you're not going to teleport there. You're going to get there somehow. So you've got public transport, my key money, petrol. Somehow you've got to get there. And then, of course, you've got to pay for something when you're there. Now, we'll go into this on another video, I'm sure, but I do think the guy should pay for the first date. And I know that's very controversial, so I'll explore that more with you another time. However, I do not ever think a woman should go on a date for a free meal. Never, ever, ever, ever. And every woman, every man should always have money if they're going on a date. So in some ways, if you don't have money to date, then should you be dating? I know. Big question, huh? Let's pause on that while I have a quick drink. Feel free to give me your thoughts on that, by the way. Because the thing is, you know, I've already talked about public transport, petrol, the food, the drink. But then for some people, they need clothes. If your clothes are really outdated, then you might want to buy some new clothes for dating. You know, you might want to be trying to make a great impression. Your photos could be quite old, which is also another topic we'll talk about another day. Probably on Friday when we do presentation and polish. But, you know, you might want to brush up on things. You might want to buy a few new outfits. And there you go. There's your money that you might need to spend on the night. So that makes things really difficult too. So you might then find yourself on a date, and let's say you've just had a coffee date. All right, it's not me. I have had them in the past, by the way, and I don't really like them. But let's say you go on a coffee date. Everything's going really, really well. You getting along famously. And so one of you says, well, it's nearly dinner time. Why don't we go for dinner? And then you're freaking out. You're thinking, hold on a second. I barely managed to scrape together the money for the coffee and we haven't paid for that and I'm not sure who's paying for who. And now you want to go for dinner from here? What are we going to do? So then you might think, all right, okay, all right, maybe Thai, something really cheap. But then you have to try and say that to the person in a way that perhaps doesn't reveal that you don't have a lot of money. Maybe you do feel comfortable. Good on you. Maybe you can say it. And actually, I did once have a guy, we'd been to play pool, which is great. We played some pool, we had some drinks, and then I was like, all right, well, let's go for dinner. And he said, we can, but only if you pay. That's where it got complicated because I felt really awkward. I didn't know that he didn't have a lot of money, And it was brave of him, really brave to bring that up. But he did bring it up, so good on him. But then it put me in a position where I was suddenly thinking, God, do I want to pay for this guy? I mean, I was enjoying myself, but how much do I want to invest in this night? And if he doesn't have any money, will he ever have any money? Is this what he's always like? Or is this just, you know, if you get paid monthly, sometimes by the end of the month, you're pretty skint. You know, is it that sort of situation? Or is it always going to be like this? Will he always not really have any money? So I had to really think about it. And then the thought occurred to me, if I say, I don't have it, would he have thought I was only asking him because I thought he was going to pay? See, so it's a difficult situation for both sides, because nobody wants to be the one admitting it. Nobody wants to be the one who's having to be, like, sort of seen a bit cheap and squimpy. But that's the reality. And a lot of people are out there like that. And, you know, it happens to the best of us that we might be struggling at the end of the month, or we might be, you know, earlier I talked about saving. And, you know, maybe you've got a little bit of money to go out for a couple of drinks, but you don't have the money for dinner, because you're saving for something bigger. By the way, if you're saving for a major holiday, if you're going overseas for 6 months or something, you probably shouldn't be dating at all. Because, like I said earlier, what we're talking about here is dating with the view for a relationship. So I wouldn't actually like somebody to start dating me and then tell me they're going overseas. And that's the reason why they could only ever do cheap dates, because they were saving for that. Because basically it means that they weren't willing to invest in the relationship all along. And that's, you know, that means that they were probably using me, trying to see what they could get from me. And frankly, that's not something I'm looking for. Now, I also said earlier that I'm not into expensive clothes or anything like that. And I'm also not into big fancy expensive dinners. So when we're talking about whether somebody's going to have the money going forward, it's not necessarily about somebody paying all the time. And I certainly don't mean that when I say that the guy should pay for the first date. I said first date, not every date. Sooner or later, no matter what, you both have to have the money for dating, because it's so expensive. And living, you know, spending your time at home and saving money and eating cheaply, you might be putting your money away for dating, but it'll only go so far. So no matter what, dating is expensive. Have you been to the movies lately? You know, even on your own, if you want to buy some popcorn and a Coke, maybe a Choc Top, and then you're looking at like $30, $40. So that's on your own. Imagine if you're going on a date with somebody and maybe you split it with them, or maybe they buy the tickets and you buy all the food. But, you know, I think you can get a deal for like 2 drinks and a large popcorn, but it's like $25. So no matter what, there are going to be things that you need to pay for, and you should be paying for. Nobody should be getting a free ride when it comes to dating. So this is the sort of thing that really could be a deal breaker. Now, I know it could sound a bit shallow, but if you're used to a certain type of life, then maybe that's the kind of life you're looking to continue living. And short of falling in love with somebody and finding out later that they don't have any money, or, you know, falling in love at first sight, let's say, and knowing nothing about them, you know, that's a movie. That's not real life. It doesn't happen. I've never known it to happen. Let's put it that way. If anybody has known it to happen, please share the story. But, you know, that sort of thing doesn't happen. So short of that, you're going to need to have money. And being able to continue to pay your way is important. I always say, start as you mean to continue. So going out with somebody and possibly spending more than you should is not a good idea. You can be really, really tempted because you don't want to let them know that you can't afford things. So it may be that you could only afford to have drinks tonight, tonight, on the date. But when they say, do you want to go for dinner, you're like, all right, I'll just not pay my car insurance this week or whatever. And then you end up spending far more than you should. In some ways, that gives them the impression that that's a sort of date you can afford all the time. And it's not necessarily the sort of date you can afford all the time. So what are you going to do next time? Do you know what I mean? How are you going to maintain that? It's not possible necessarily unless you get like Win Tats Auto. And I know that going out with friends when you're with your friends, they know what your situation is. And it may be, like I know some of my friends will go and we'll share some garlic bread or something, and then we'll have our own mains. But on a date, if you want garlic bread and that person doesn't, and you still want the garlic bread, you might go, oh well, I brought it up now, I better order it. Saying, oh, would you like garlic bread? And they say, oh, no garlic for me. And then you're like, if it's not about kissing, that is. Say you want some other entree that they don't, but you've brought it up, and you might feel a bit of a deal if you say, all right, I won't have it either. So you might order it, and you've then got 2 entrees, So you've got 2 entrees, 2 mains, drinks, and then what if one of you says about dessert? If they say dessert, what do you feel compelled to have dessert? Maybe you do. So that's just cost you a small fortune. And that's not how you would usually live at all. Because when you're with your friends, you'd split everything. And maybe with family as well, if you go out with a group, there are things that you split. Or, I'll buy garlic bread and you buy some wedges, or, I like pubs. And, you'll have some of theirs, and it's all even Steven, but it's different on a date. And unfortunately, some of us sort of give in to that kind of thing, and that means we've spent far more than we wanted to. So what do you do? What do you do? Do you not date at all? Or do you try to be a bit clever about it and a bit creative? Honestly, creativity can have its downsides. So if you're going to suggest to somebody, why don't we go for a walk, or why don't you just come over to my house? Even if the person knows you, that if you know the person in person, if you've actually spent time with them, that's about the only time you should ever invite somebody to your house anyway. But that costs money. So, you've got coffee, maybe they don't drink coffee, maybe you have to buy hot chocolate or buy tea, something that you wouldn't usually have in the house. And then you're also probably going to buy some biscuits or some cake or something, you know what I mean? So you've still spent money. Even though you were trying to make it really cheap, you've spent money. And the same thing if they invite you to their house. Picnics. Some people think that picnics are really cheap, but when was the last time you packed one? It's not cheap. And you know what? It's a sort of thing that you should probably delay until you know the person a bit better anyway, because you want to know what they like and what you like, and you know what you like, but you want to know what they like, because if you're packing that picnic and you don't know what they like, holy cow, you're going to end up buying all sorts of things that you don't even eat because you're not sure if they do. And of course you want to cater to them. I have a look on, I always watch The Bachelor, as most of you know, and I watch the meals that they bring out, the picnics that they bring out, and I think they all get fed earlier. But if I was on those dates, I wouldn't eat half that stuff. Don't bring me out half those things. I don't drink it and I don't eat it. So fancy being on a date, somebody's gone to a lot of trouble, and to be polite, you should really eat the food that they're providing, but you don't eat it. What do you do? And they've gone to a lot of expense, because even packing a really simple picnic can cost you like $20-30, especially if you don't know the person, because you're putting in all this stuff for them. So imagine that. Imagine how much how much packing a picnic will cost you. That's being creative, but creative with the date, but not necessarily with your finances. Now, I have been asked to go for a walk in the park before, and you know what? It's not a good idea, because sometimes by you being frugal and needing to be frugal, it can mean that you put somebody else in a situation where they have to make a decision about their safety. So parks are supposed to be safe. They're, usually highly, there are a lot of people there usually, but depending on the time of the day, there might not be. And meeting somebody for the first time in a park is a bit weird. I gotta say, I think it's a bit weird. So it's not the sort of thing that I would do. I have done it. Most of the things I have to say, guys, most of the things I'll talk to you about have been either broached with me and I've reacted in such a way that I'm like, bad idea, wouldn't do it, no thank you very much. Or I've actually done it and it's like, it's not great. I've experimented and I've, these are the things that I can bring to you. So I have a lot of, I talk about standards, and one of these standards is really, really about security. Security is key, which is why I say about not inviting somebody to your house, not inviting yourself to someone else's house, certainly not in a bid to save money or not spend money, especially if you don't have it. So for me to go and meet somebody at a park or at somebody's house would mean that I would be dropping a standard that I hold very, very dearly. My security is my responsibility, and under no circumstances will I drop that standard for anyone unless I see a really good reason. And unfortunately, somebody else's budget doesn't factor into that. So that goes back to, it also touches on, I guess, the deal breaker that I talked about earlier. So if the only way you're able to meet me is by suggesting meeting in a park, then I would say thank you very much, but no. Because it's possibly a really big indication of the future and that you will never have any money. And if I don't ever get to go out or go and do things like go to the movies and stuff, then that's not really a relationship, because a relationship built on one person's financial situation isn't balanced. So most of us are not Richard Gere, and we're definitely not Julia Roberts, i.e. a prostitute. But my reason I bring that up is that worked for them. It started off in an ominous situation, but they fell in love and it worked out really well. But that's not necessarily going to work in real life. So one person having money and the other person not having money isn't necessarily going to be a good way of doing things. And in that situation, you don't even have to have a lot more money than the person. If you're already struggling to, with your finances and struggling to live, but you can afford to go on a coffee date or go for dinner, go for the occasional drinks or, that sort of thing, and that person can't, then you have to think, well, maybe they're never going to be able to. And that's something that you have to really make a decision about, whether you're willing to enter into a life like that. Obviously, it's a first date. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But it is a situation that you maybe need to sort of try and do a bit of a forecast of the future, and based on the conversations that you've had, see if you can figure out whether this is a one-time thing or not. Now, if you're thinking maybe it's a one-time thing, then you could say to them, you know what? Let's just leave it for now. Let's just keep chatting, getting to know each other. Let's talk about it next week. And then if it happens again, then you've got an even better indication that that's how they are. That's their situation. Now, by no means am I saying that we judge people or anything like that, but every person in this event has the right to make decisions based on their own preferences. So, like I said before, if you're happy to get into a relationship that doesn't include a lot of going out, if you're not a very social person, then that could work really, really well for you. I would still suggest that you need to have dates that involve going out to begin with. Because when you go out with somebody, you see a lot of things about them that you wouldn't see at home. You see the way they interact with staff. You see whether they turn up on time. You know, how they interact with you in public. Whether they treat you well. Whether they dress for the occasion. All of these things are important factors in dating. But if you don't ever go out, if you don't ever leave the house and go to a cafe or a restaurant or to the movies, you won't see those things. So it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily getting a good indication of what the person's actually like, which is really, really important. So I think we'll wrap it up soon. But I want to sort of focus a little bit on the impression, because what I've just been talking about is all of that stuff will have an impression on somebody. So what's the impression that you want to make on somebody? Do you want them to... Now, I'm not talking about them to like you because you have money, but if the life that you want to live is a life of going out, going on dates, being able to take somebody out, being able to go out with somebody regardless of who pays. As I said before, everybody needs to have money in dating. Then maybe you have to think about whether it's time to date or not. Because if you don't have the money right now, then could be that you need to just have a little pause, work on some other areas of your life, perhaps including your finances. Maybe you stop going out, maybe you save some money for that, and then come out ready to go and, you know, maybe give yourself a bit of a makeover if that's, you know, if you're worried about your clothes. You know, I mentioned clothes earlier, the impression they make, whether you match each other. Matching is actually a really important thing that I do need to talk about at some stage, but in short, I do believe two people match. So there are people you see, you know, when you see couples that you go, what does she see in him? What does he see in her? Well, that's because in your mind, they don't match. Maybe they match really well. You don't know them necessarily. But not matching somebody and you wondering whether that person will like you because of your clothes or your hair, or, you know, whether you wear makeup or can't afford makeup or whatnot, that is, again, going to make an impact on whether you ask somebody out or not in the first place. And it can, of course, have an impact on whether you should be dating. Does that make sense? Alright guys, so give me some thumbs up if this makes sense. Let me know how it's going. And let's see some questions and answers. What do you think? Has anybody got any questions for me? I'm happy to... And oh, hey girls. We've got some latecomers. I'm just up to the question time. So if anybody's got any questions about finances and dating and finances and how it relates to dating, by all means, please leave them. If you have any stories that you'd like to share, by all means do. And while you're thinking about that, I will tell you what I am going to be talking about tomorrow night. So, tomorrow night, yeah, I know. I know, that's why it's great to see you. I wasn't sure if some of my northern hemisphere people would be able to make it, but I really appreciate it. I had to do it a bit later because of the Melburnians and the Aussies, because it's 7 p.m. here. And so people need to get home from work and have dinner and whatnot. But tomorrow night, if anybody's able to make it, and I would really love it if you could. Oh, hey Karishma, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Tomorrow night I'll be talking about health and fitness. So if you have any thoughts on that, think about them between now and tomorrow, and I'll go for it, Karishma. But if you have any thoughts on health and fitness, by all means think about them and bring them along tomorrow night. But I'll be talking about being healthy and not being healthy, being fit and not being fit, and look, both sides, being healthy and, you know, being or not, will have an impact on what people think about you and whether you're dateable, because all of this is about being dateable. Because don't we all want to be dateable? Don't we all want somebody to be able to approach us because they're interested, or somebody to say yes because they're interested? All right, Krishma, let's see your question. Oh, Lindsay, great. Okay, I'll read it out for those who... Oh, there we go. how do you feel if I pay for I ordered and she pays for what she ordered? Yeah, I don't have any issue with that, Lindsay. I guess the thing is, and this is something I did mean to say, that as much as I don't think women should ever go on a date because they want a free meal, sometimes the guy not paying will have an impact on whether the girl wants to see him again. So I guess I'll go into this a little bit further. It's not about the money necessarily, but women go to a lot of effort for dates. Now, I actually don't think you should ever buy new clothes for a date. Ever. Ever. And we will talk about that more on Friday in presentation and polish. But a big part of what guys are attracted to in women is the way they dress. So, you know, you might like somebody's hair and, you know, she has great coloured hair. Excuse me, flicking my hair around. But you might like somebody's hair, for example, as something that a lot of women spend a lot of money on. Now, guys don't necessarily know how much that costs, and so they wouldn't factor that in. But for women to maintain the appearance that we are walking around with every day, and which is what attracts you to us in a lot of cases, isn't cheap. It's definitely not cheap. You know, if you get your hair cut, I don't know where everybody is, but in Melbourne, for a woman to get her hair coloured, like just a normal, not even fancy, not even a million different highlights and things like that. So for colour, and you usually get a cut while you're there, you're looking at a minimum of $100. And that's at a lower scale hair salon. So obviously we're getting that done whether we're dating or not. I completely get it. But sometimes that's the thing that attracts you to us. And then we've done all of that. We've done the nails and everything. You know, I said earlier about what's attractive and what you're looking at in somebody else and the impression that they make. And you go, will they look at me because they're always so done to, you know, put together well, and, you know, they always go to a lot of effort. Are they going to look at me? So if you're looking at someone who looks like they've gone to a lot of effort, they probably have. And that costs money. Now, you won't not ever find out how much that costs, but it does. And I tell you what, there are a lot of women, and I'm talking about women because well, guess what? I am a woman, so I know these things. And by all means, girls, feel free to comment on this stuff. Because not every woman does everything. Not every woman colours her hair and gets her hair cut and straightened or curled and goes and gets regular blow waves or anything like that and gets her nails done and has to have the tan and the waxing. And not every woman does it. But most women get some of those things done. So that costs. So my thought is that if a guy pays for the date, it's kind of evening it up. Alright, it's not a science. It's my thought, it's my theory, but that's what I believe. So if on a date you two discuss that you'll go halves, fine. I have no issue with that. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just one that I like. And even when guys are paid for me on dates, what would usually happen is that we'll have the date. I'll always offer to pay. Like, I am not going on a date without money. But if he says, no, don't be silly, I'll pay, I'll say, well, okay, well, thank you very much. That's very, very nice of you. And then if we go for a wander, if we're in the street, if you're in Melbourne, you know, if we're in Carlton, then of course you're going to go for ice cream. So I'll pay for the ice cream. I'll always pay for something. But, you know, maybe he's paid for the lion's share of the date, but I'll always contribute somehow. So, I don't know if that answered your question, Lindsay. It's up to you guys, but it still means that no matter what, you both have to have money to go on a date, which is what I said earlier. Everybody needs to have money when they're going on a date. So, let's see, what did Karishma say? Okay, so to the first one, does the male ego really get hurt if the wife makes more money than the husband? Alright, guys, why don't you answer that one? from my experience, from the people I know, yes, it has happened. It's not with everybody because people are individuals, and some guys do feel it's their place in life to provide, and if they're not providing more money than the woman in the family or in the relationship, then yeah, their ego can be bruised. Guys, I'd really love you to join in on that question because I know there are a few guys here. But I also know that some guys can lord it over the woman if he does make too much money. So that can be difficult too. So money's going to be a difficult situation in a lot of relationships, not just at the beginning, down the track. You know, I know of situations where it has seemed really comfortable to begin with, the guy's been really willing to pay for everything, and then it becomes a situation where the woman thinks, well, why would I start paying now? Why would I? So it's going to be balanced out, and that's why I say the guy should pay for the first date, but nowhere did I say he should pay for every date, because everybody has to pay their way. It's just that first date. I'm a bit traditional like that, and I gave you some reasons before as to why. So Lindsay has answered that one. He doesn't think so. My ex was earning more than I was, and I was happy with that. So why were you happy with that, Lindsay? By all means, elaborate on that. It'd be really good to know. Because, like I said, I think it's an individual thing, and some people will, you know, just take it in their stride. And in a marriage, because some of you may not know this, but I'm divorced. In most marriages, it should even itself out anyway. You know, it all goes into a pool of some sort. Even if you keep your finances separate, you'll still be pooling some of it together, and it'll all be contributing to the life that you have together. So the life that you're building together, what you've already got together. So, you know, it all comes out in the end. But definitely I think that there are some situations where it hasn't worked out well. And in fact, I know of somebody who she met a guy who didn't have a lot of money. He was previously in a relationship and had children with somebody else. And he came to her with nothing. She was earning more money. She had started saving from a very, very young age, was very focused on her future. She knew she wanted to buy a house. She knew she needed to be in control of her life. So she was working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And so she was saving her money. So when he came along, he didn't have a lot of money. He was paying for 2 children from his former marriage. And she paid for most things. And now they're in a situation where it's evened out a bit more. She's not working as much as she was. They've now got children together. And it's evened itself out. So not all guys are daunted by that. There will be some guys, by the way, who'll actually really like it. And I know from personal experience, when I've been dating, that when guys say, oh, do you have your own house? And I say, yes. And then we go on a date and suddenly they're like picking somewhere really expensive. And I'm like, oh, is this the sort of place you usually come to? And they're like, no. And I say, oh, have you been here before? No. And I said, why tonight? And they're like, oh, I just thought that was your thing. And basically they, over the conversation, admitted that they thought that I had money and I was going to pay for the date. But they'd chosen this super expensive place. So, you know, people can get the impression that you have more money than you have because you have a house, for example. But I'm still paying off this house. And a lot of my money goes toward that, you know. The majority of my money goes toward that, and that's just how it is. Yeah, so, like, you know, there'll be some guys who are actually attracted to that, and that's not fair to anybody. But, so nobody should be attracted to somebody just because of their money. And you know what I do always like to say? Rich people, especially guys, did not get rich by showering women with money and gifts and toys and holidays and things like that. The really, really rich ones are looking after their money and investing it well. And it's only when they've got, their money put aside and they're all sorted out that they can afford to splurge a little bit. And it may or may not be on you. So best not to count your chickens before they hatch. Okay, so Lindsay said, I have a disability and was on a low wage. Learned there is more in a relationship than money. We had interests in common and we enjoy each other's company. Exactly. And that's amazing. But you know what? Sometimes it can take a little while to get to know each other before you can really get down to that, and really actually enjoy each other for the things that money doesn't bring. You know what I mean? Because, like I said before, there's safety and security and other aspects like that are important to one or other party. So, anybody else got any questions? So I might just tell you a little bit more while I've got you about later in the week. We are looking at, 5 nights. And so tomorrow night will be health and fitness. Wednesday will be job, career. I call it the daily grind because most people are, sort of grinding away at a job that they may not love. And Thursday will be lifestyle. So that's about hobbies and the way you live your life and, family, decisions you make in life. And Friday will be presentation and polish. Now, that's a really important one. It's not just about how you look, let's put it that way. It is about the way you present yourself, the things you say online, the way you talk online, using full sentences, things like that, the things you post. And it's not just online, it's in your online profile if you have one. It's the way you talk to people when you're out and about. So, I'm aware that not everybody does online dating. So I am, making sure that with everything I do, it relates to both online and real world, as I like to call it. So, it'll be the way you talk to people and the impressions that will have on somebody. So, whether you talk to somebody well or, if you're a bit rude or whatever. So all of these things really contribute to whether you're dateable. I really think they do. So I'll be talking about all those. And on Friday night, I'll also be bringing an offer to you that I would like to think that you will all be swooping up on. Because I think from the questions that we've had so far, you can see that there is a lot of information that I've got here. And I'm really enjoying passing it along to you guys. So if there are no more questions, I know some people, latecomers, are still here. But any more questions, guys? Feel free to think about questions for the other topics as well that we'll be going over later in the week. And if you can, so if you're not here live, guys, so if you're watching this later on, you can still feel free to leave your comments because I will go back and respond to them. Just as we have today, we didn't have any comments during, but if there had been comments during, I would certainly go back and respond to all of them because I do want to make sure everybody gets their moment in the sun and that, you have questions and comments that will be answered. And you know what? Feel free to answer each other's questions because I can tell you from the girls' point of view and from the guys that I know, guys I've dated, clients that I have. But, guys, I'd love for you to have some input and tell us your experiences, just as Lindsay's done there. It's really handy to have that. So, all right, I think we'll finish up there. Thanks so much for joining in, especially the people who've gotten up really early overseas. And please go back and watch this video and just leave a comment whenever you feel like it. And to those who haven't watched any of this yet and watch it later on, please give me a thumbs up, maybe a heart, leave a comment. And, even if you can't come to every single night this week, watch the videos later on, leave a comment. That way I'll know that you've been involved and it'll be really helpful for me to see what sort of things you guys are interested in that I can bring to you in the future. And if we can figure out a time that works for everybody, look, let's do it. But we've had people from all over the world and I am thrilled to have so many people interested in my lifestylers and relationship finders group. So I'm fabulously happy about that. And you know what? If you have any posts you want to put into the group, please do. Now, I'm pretty strict on them being positive and uplifting and, ways of helping each other along the journey. Gosh, I never say that word, but how along the journey of life, that is. So, things that are going to contribute and maybe make them think a bit differently. I put a lot of questions in here and I don't always get a lot of responses, but I know that it's making you think, and so that's what's important, isn't it? But the more times you comment on someone else's post, guess what? They'll comment on yours too, and that way we're all giving back a little bit. Even though, we're not all the lifestylists, that's me, and I'm so thrilled to be here helping you guys along with your lives. I really appreciate you making comments, throwing in questions, testing me a little bit. It's terrific because it gives me a chance to get the knowledge that I've got so many things in my head. It gives me a chance to get it out into the open for you all. And of course, if you ever have anybody who you think will be interested in joining the group, please just invite them. You can just add them quite easily. Alright guys, thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, if not before. Alright, see you later. Bye.